The memento pattern is used to restore an object to a previous state, and a common use case for the memento pattern is when implementing an undo feature. For example, most text editors such as Microsoft Word have undo features where you can undo things by pressing Ctrl-Z on Windows or Command-Z on Mac. So here are some things that you might want to do in a text editor. So you might want to add a title to the document, such as test title. You might want to write some text, such as hello there, my name is Dan. And then you might want to update or change the title of the document to the life of a developer, my memoirs. And a simple way to implement this text editor in code would be to create a single editor class and have a field for title and content, and also have a field that stores each of the previous values for each field in some list. So here we have the UML for a editor class. It has a title field and a content field, both of type string. And then we have a previous titles field, which stores a list of all of the previous titles. So if we update the title, it will push the current title onto this list and then update the title. And the same thing for content. Okay, we have a previous content list too. But the problem with this solution is that every time we add a new field, such as author, date, or is published, we have to keep storing a list of previous states or all of the changes for each of the new fields. So you can see that this editor class is going to become very bloated with a large number of fields. And also, how would we actually implement the undo feature with this solution? Because if the user changed the title, then they changed the content, then pressed undo, the current implementation has no knowledge of what the user last did. It doesn't know whether the title last changed or the content last changed. And so when undo is pressed, our solution doesn't really know whether we should undo the title or undo the content, or both at the same time. So this isn't a great solution. So let's think of a better way of doing this. So instead of having multiple fields in the editor class, we could create a separate class to store the state of our editor at any given time. So here we have our editor class, title, content fields, and now we have a list of previous state objects, and this is a state object which stores the title and content of the editor at any given time. And note that this is a composition relationship represented by the diamond arrow, where editor is composed of or has a field of the editor state class, and it has a list of editor states. And this is a better solution because we can undo multiple times, and we also don't pollute the editor class with too many fields. We just have one field for storing a list of editor states. However, this solution is violating the single responsibility principle, as our editor class currently has multiple responsibilities. It is currently managing the state of the editor, so it is storing a list of states, and it's also providing the features that we need from an editor. So what we should do is we should take all the state management stuff out of the editor and put it somewhere else into some separate class, and this is what we end up with. So now we have a separate class called history, which is basically managing the list of states or list of previous states from our editor. So here we can see that we have a create state method inside of the editor, and the create state method simply returns an editor state object, or the current state of the editor. And that is represented by a dotted line arrow here. So we can see that editor has a dependency of editor state because one of its methods is returning an editor state object, which is the create state method, is returning this editor state object. And then we also have a history class, which has a field with a list of editor states, hence the diamond arrow or composition relationship represented here. So this history class, we have a backup method, and the backup method, whenever this is called, it will add onto the list of states the current editor state. So editor.createState returns the current state of the editor, and then we push or add it onto this states list, okay, which is storing our sort of history from the editor. And then we also have an undo method in this history class, which basically gets or pops off the last state from the states list. It then removes that state from the list and then restores the editor to that last state. So that is how we sort of implement the undo feature now. So this is actually the memento pattern, this kind of represented by this UML diagram. But let's have a look at how the memento pattern is represented in the Gang of Four book. So here are the abstract names that each class would be given in the Gang of Four book. So here we have the originator, which is analogous to our editor class. We have the memento, which is basically our state object. And then we have the caretaker, which in our case is called the history object. We can see that our solution actually differs slightly from the original Gang of Four memento pattern, as our caretaker class, which is the history class, also has a field that stores a reference to the editor class, so that the history class can restore the editor state when the user clicks undo. So when the user goes into their history, clicks undo, then we have a reference to the editor class, so we can actually call editor.restore and pass in the state that we want to restore the editor to. And that's just nice, sort of convenient way of doing that, and it works for our kind of program or our application. So you can see that with these design patterns, they are not, you don't have to follow them exactly. You can change them slightly. It's just the general shape or idea that we can kind of follow. Okay, so you don't have to follow them exactly. They can be customized or slightly changed, but the general shape is still there. This is still the memento pattern. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to implement this solution in code so that it makes more sense to you. So first of all, we are going to create our editor class, or using the Gang of Four abstract name, that will be the originator. So let's come into here and create a new C# class called editor. And I'm just going to make a note to say that this is the originator. Okay, so our editor has currently just two fields. It has a public string field. Sorry, it has a property. It has a public property for title, which has a getter and a setter, and it has a public property called content, and we have a getter and setter for that. And we're now going to create the memento, or the editor state class. Okay, so let's come into here and create a new C# class called editor state. And editor state is just going to store two fields, so it's going to have two private fields. And I'm going to make these read only, so that once the editor state is created, it cannot be changed. So that's going to just add to the robustness of our code, because once the editor state has been created, once we've took a backup of our editor, then we shouldn't then be able to edit that. Okay, it should just be sort of constant. So let's create a field for title and a private read-only string for content. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a constructor, and in the constructor we can pass in the title and content, and then we're just going to set our title and content. And then what I want to also do is create a getter for title, so that we can actually retrieve the title for this current state. So we'll create a method called getTitle, and that is very simply just going to return the title. And we'll also create a getter because we will need access to the contents if we're going to restore the contents and the title to previous states. We're going to restore the editor to a previous state, then we need to be able to actually get the title and the contents from this editor state object. So let's create another getter called getContent, and we're just going to return the content. And what I'm also going to do here is in this editor state object, I'm going to add some state metadata. Okay, and I'm going to make it private read only, and I'm just going to store the date that the state was created at, and I'm going to call this state created at. And what I'm going to do is when a editor state object is created, we can set the state created at field equal to datetime.now. So whenever we create a backup, we're kind of storing the date and time that the backup was created. Okay, so it's just like a little bit of extra metadata to give us a little bit more information about the state, or when the state was backed up. So let's also create a getter for this date field. So this is going to return a date time piece of data, and we're just going to return the state created at. Okay, so that's everything we needed to do in our Memento object. So I'll just make a note that this in the gang of 4 is referred to as the Memento object, the state object. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into our editor class, and I'm going to create a couple of methods. So I'm going to create a method called createState, which is going to return an editor state object. Okay, and this editor state is going to take the title and the content. Okay, so whenever we create a state, we're just simply returning the current state of the editor, the current title and the current content. Okay, and then to restore the editor to a previous state, we can create a restore method which takes in an editor state object, and we can just simply set the title equal to that state's title. So we can say, let me change this actually, we'll just call this state, and we will say this is going to be equal to state.title, so get title, and then we'll set the content equal to state.getContent. Okay, so that's everything we need to do in our editor class. We have our fields in the editor. We also have a method for creating a sort of backup or a sort of state object of the current state of the editor. And we also have a restore method for restoring the editor to any previous state. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we need to make our sort of history class, or in the gang of 4, that will be referred to as our caretaker class. So we're calling it the history object, or the history class, and the history class stores a list of all the previous editor states. And we're going to call this states, and we'll just set it equal to a new list of editor states. And in our case, we're also going to store a reference to the editor class, the editor object. Okay, and then when we construct the history object, we need to actually pass in the editor that the history class is referring to. So let's create the constructor, and we're going to pass an editor as a parameter, and we're just going to set the editor equal to the editor that we pass into this history object upon object creation. Okay, so now we need to add our backup method. So let's create a public method called backup, and all this is going to do is it's going to add onto the states list the current state of the editor, and we have a create state method which does that for us. So that's pretty simple. And we also need a undo method. So this is going to allow us to restore the editor to its last backed up state. So what we need to do here is we need to just perform a check to say to check if we actually have any backed up states. So we can say if states.count equals 0, then we can just return. Okay, so if we don't have any backed up, if we have no states in our states list, then we can just return here. There's nothing to undo. Otherwise, we can get the last state from the editor. So the previous state, and that's going to be equal to states.last. We can then remove this state from the states list. So this is the equivalent of just popping the state off of the list, off of the end of the list. And then what we can do is we can call our editor, and we can call the restore method, and we can pass the last state or the previous state, and the editor will be restored to its previous state. And what I'm also going to do is a kind of nice method that we can add to this history class is one called show history, where we basically list all of the history, all of the backed up states that we have of our editor. So let's actually implement this. I'm just going to put a new line here, and I'm going to say history. Here's the list of mementos. And what we're going to do is we can loop through all of the states, and we can just console write state dot get. Actually, I think we need to add another method to the editor state class. Yeah, because I wanted to call a method called getName, but we actually haven't implemented that yet. So if we go back into our editor state class, we're going to create another method called getName, and this is just going to return something that we can display on the console to sort of represent the state. So let's see. So what we're going to do is we're going to log the created at date, and we will also log the title. Okay, so this is just basically going to be our kind of some way of a sort of unique identifier for the state object. So if we go back into history, we can see the error has disappeared, and now everything should be ready to start using. So now if we come back, if we come into our program.cs file, let's actually test out our Memento Pattern solution for this editor. So I'm going to create a new editor. I'm also going to create a history object, and we're going to pass the editor into this history object, and it says the namespace is missing, so let's see. So we need to move that into here, and let's see, So we just need to change the namespace here, and hopefully that fixes things. Okay, good. And then what we can do is we can create a backup of our editor, so we can call the backup method. And then let's change the title to test. And then let's also back up the editor. Okay, so here we are backing up a sort of blank editor, and then we are backing up the editor where the title is changed to test. And then we can change the, let's change the content to hello there, my name is Dan. And then we can back up again. And then we'll change the title to my mementos, why not? Okay, so now let's actually log out what the title of the editor is. And let's also log the content. Okay, so let's actually just check what is going on here. So we can see the title is what we last changed the title to, which is this, The Life of a Dev, which is correct. And the content is, hello there, my name is Dan. So this is correct. And now what we can do, let's test out our undo functionality. So let's call history.backup and, history.undo. And let's actually log the title and the content here after undoing. So let's see what we get here. Okay, so the title is now test, but the content has remained the same. So is this correct? So the last thing we did is we updated the title from test to the life of a dev. So the title should be test and the content should remain the same as hello there, my name is Dan. So that is correct, so that's working correctly. The state has been restored to its previous state, and that is working perfectly. Let's also test out our show history function. So if this was, I don't know, a web browser, I guess this would allow us to view the list of histories, I guess, or a list of web pages that we have visited. And you can see here the backups that we have of our editor, or our list of mementos. We can see here we have one where the title is test and one where the title is blank, so this is working pretty good. And finally, let's call undo again and then log out the values. And we can see the title is test and the content has gone from this to nothing, which is correct. And then I guess if we do it one more time, we should just get a blank document. Okay, perfect. So our solution is working correctly. So when should you use the memento pattern? So the memento pattern can be used when you want to produce a snapshot of an object state and to be able to restore the object to a previous state. It's a commonly used pattern for implementing the undo feature, and so provides a common solution that a team of developers can quickly understand and get on the same page with. So what are some pros and cons of the memento pattern? So one of the pros is that you can simplify the originator's code, which in our case was the editor class, by letting the caretaker or the history class maintain the history of the originator state, satisfying the single responsibility principle. And this kind of makes our code more easier to understand and improves the readability, and also means that our classes have sort of less reasons to change. You know, if we need to change the way that we store history, then we just need to update the history class. We don't need to touch the editor class. And one of the cons of this Memento pattern is that it can consume a lot of RAM, or random access memory, if lots of mementos are created. So if we have to create thousands of mementos, and potentially each memento could be storing a large amount of data. For example, if we wanted to restore a video to a previous state, if we had some sort of video editor application, then taking a backup of a whole video would consume a lot of RAM. So taking lots of mementos of this would be potentially very bad, because it could slow down the application or cause it to crash. So there are other design patterns that can be used to restore states if the memento pattern is causing too much RAM to be consumed.